Fear the one who walks through hell with a quiet mind, because they've already made peace with the fire. You thought you were fighting a person. You weren't. You were fighting the universe behind them. Every time you tried to break them, you were picking a fight with something far bigger than your understanding. And you still don't get it. The ones you ignored, laughed at, and left for dead. They're the ones that carry storms inside them. You weren't ready. Like this message? Then do what matters. Like and subscribe, because every time you engage, it tells the algorithm to push this to more chosen ones, people who need to hear this. It's how we keep the fire spreading. You may be one voice, but you're helping build a signal that can't be silenced. When you rise, you lift others. Let's keep rising. Welcome, chosen one. No one saw you coming, not because you were hiding, but because they never thought someone like you could carry this kind of power. You were overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. But that's the oldest mistake in every war story. The enemy that haunts you forever is the one you laughed at before the fight even began. They thought you were just another shadow in the background. But shadows belong to those who move in silence. And when the time is right, they strike without warning. That's you. You are the quiet before the quake, the calm face of a coming storm. The power of being chosen isn't about being perfect. It's not about glowing in the light or screaming your truth to the world. It's about what's been built in the dark, quietly, patiently, painfully. It's about the long nights, the silent battles, the scars that no one claps for. That's where you were forged. And what was born from all that? A force too big for them to understand. They thought you were alone. That's the lie they fed you. But the universe doesn't leave its chosen stranded. It just lets them believe they are, for a time. Because it's in that solitude that power is shaped. The silence isn't a curse, it's a test. And you passed. So now, they don't fear your face. They fear what they can't explain. They fear how you keep standing when everything says you should have broken. They fear how you didn't rage, you evolved. You didn't whine, you watched. You didn't chase, you became. You are not a threat because of noise. You're a threat because you listened, waited, and learned. They were fighting you thinking you were alone, but they were up against everything that made you, every pain, every betrayal, every sleepless night, every time you were counted out. That's the army behind you. That's the power they can't touch. So don't you dare question your light. Don't you dare doubt your power. The enemy's biggest win would be convincing you that you're not dangerous, that you're not worthy, that you're not chosen. But look around. Look at what you've survived. Look at how you're still here. They were loud, you were quiet, they were seen, you were hidden. But now, it's your move. They never saw you coming. And now, they can't stop what's already in motion. You were chosen, not by chance, but by force. And that truth alone will keep your enemies awake at night. So if you've felt that silent burn inside you, the kind no one sees, but it never stops, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. This message isn't for everyone. It's for the ones who move different. If you're still here, it's because you're not meant to blend in. You were built to break patterns. Drop a 777 in the comments if you feel that truth pulling at your chest. That's not just motivation, it's memory waking up. And now, let's break it down step by step. Stay locked in. If you're the one they never saw coming, prove it by staying till the end. Let's begin. Number 1. They played checkers in a world of chess. Then you showed up and flipped the whole board. They thought they buried you in silence. What they didn't know was that silence was your war cry. They had the numbers, the connections, the spotlight, the system bent in their favor. So they laughed, they boasted, they made you feel like you were out of place, out of line, out of luck. But they never realized you were never playing their game. You were studying the board, not begging for a seat at the table. And now, it's too late. You were the invisible weapon hidden in plain sight, and the universe just took the safety off. They always assumed danger looked like chaos, noise, fame, power flaunted. They never saw the threat coming because it wore your face. The quiet one, the overlooked one, the one who kept showing up when everyone else stopped looking. They don't know how to fight someone who doesn't need applause, doesn't need attention, and sure as hell doesn't need approval. They don't know what to do with someone who kept getting back up without being cheered on. You were never harmless. You were calculating, watching, evolving. While they performed, you prepared. While they posted, you practiced. While they mocked, you mastered. And now the balance has shifted. Not because you screamed louder, but because you moved smarter. You are the anomaly, the variable they couldn't predict, the glitch in their simulation. They built systems to keep people like you small, but they forgot something. The universe doesn't obey their systems, and the universe chose you. That's not poetry, that's reality. When the universe aligns itself behind someone, the rules change. Timelines bend, patterns break. You're not lucky, you're aligned. Every delay, every detour, that was the universe preparing the stage for a kind of impact they could never see coming. The longer they ignored you, the more power you built in silence. And now they fear you, not because of what you say, but because of what you've become. Unshakable, unreachable, unstoppable. Let's answer the question burning in your mind right now. Why me? Why was I chosen? Because you could be. Because most would have folded. Because most would have begged for mercy, for help, for validation. But you kept walking through the storm and made the storm your home. You think you're tired. You think you're not enough? Then why are you still standing? Here's the truth no one told you. The chosen are not picked because they're the strongest. They are picked because they are tested over and over, through silence, through rejection, through pain, until there's nothing left but fire. And that fire doesn't burn you anymore. It builds you. They made a mistake thinking you were alone. They thought you were just one person against the system. But the universe doesn't play fair. It plays for balance. And it doesn't let its chosen fall without purpose. When they tried to break you, they were fighting something they couldn't see. They were up against the will of the cosmos, the alignment of forces beyond their control. And now, they're realizing. You weren't the underdog. You were the shift. You weren't the victim. You were the reset button. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly on time. They had a head start, sure, but they were running in circles, powered by noise and ego. You were still rooted, tapped into something deeper. And now, your time hits like thunder in a silent room. Stop doubting your light. Stop questioning your place. The enemy's greatest weapon was never power. It was distraction. They wanted you to forget who you were, to chase everything but your purpose. But now you remember. Now you feel it. That quiet hum rising in your chest? That's not nerves. That's ignition. And if you've ever doubted how dangerous you are, look at their reactions. Look at how nervous they get when you stop explaining yourself. Look at how quickly they try to smear, silence, or shake you the moment you move different. They feel your rise before they understand it. So let them play their games. Let them count you out again. It only makes the moment sweeter when they realize they've been checkmated by a piece they thought was irrelevant. And for you, the chosen, stop underestimating your weight. Stop apologizing for how much space your energy takes up. They never saw you coming because you were never meant to fit in. You were made to break the pattern. Don't flinch now, don't hold back. You've already survived the fire, now become it. Because the most dangerous one isn't the one in the spotlight. It's the one standing quietly in the dark, with the universe behind them. They didn't know, but now they will. Number 2. They celebrated too early. Now comes the quiet revenge of the strategist. The loudest one in the room is never the smartest. The smartest one is already 5 steps ahead, watching them walk into a trap they set months ago. They thought they won, thought the story ended with you losing. That's how fools think. Short-term, surface level, no depth. The moment they felt like they had the upper hand, they stopped evolving. They grew lazy, cocky, loud. But you stayed silent, not because you were weak, because you were calculating. You were moving in a rhythm they couldn't hear. And now, their ignorance has matured into your moment. That's the mastermind's advantage. Real power doesn't announce itself. It studies, it absorbs, it lets the enemy show all their cards, then flips the whole table. You watched as they laughed at you, dismissed you, mocked you. You didn't react. That was the move. You let them get comfortable. You let them think the story was over. That was your setup. Because the smartest strike isn't the one you see coming. It's the one that was planned before the fight even began. They were so busy playing the crowd, they didn't see you in the back, learning every move, every flaw, every habit. They gave you everything, freely. And now they'll pay for their arrogance. Not because you shouted louder, but because you listened harder. You know what happens when someone thinks they've already won? They stop guarding themselves. They get sloppy. They lose focus. And that's when someone like you, who's been ignored, overlooked, and underestimated, becomes the most dangerous person in the room. Not because you're louder, but because you're ready. You became the mirror they didn't know they were dancing in front of. And every mistake they made, you memorized it. Every lie they told, you logged it. Every crack in their armor, you etched it into your strategy. You didn't just survive, you evolved into a weapon forged by their own ego. That's not luck, that's mastery. They'll tell themselves it was random, that they were blindsided. But deep down, they'll know. You were watching the whole time. You were never behind. You were just waiting for the moment when the odds tipped in your favor. And now, it's not just a comeback, it's a collapse, their collapse. Because here's the thing, arrogance is a slow poison. It makes people loud, lazy, and predictable. You became sharp, aware, unshakable. While they were broadcasting every move for the world to see, you were refining yours in the dark. While they needed crowds, you needed silence. While they needed validation, you needed focus. That's why you win. Let's answer the question that might be echoing in your head right now. Why didn't I just speak up sooner? Because true power doesn't speak. It strikes. It waits. It builds. You weren't late. You were precise. If you had made your move earlier, you would have missed the full picture. You would have acted emotionally, not intelligently. But now, you've got the full map. You know where the cracks are. And now when you hit, it's going to shatter everything. They don't see you coming. Not because you're hiding, but because they were never taught how to see past the surface. You're not their version of power. You don't fit their mold. That's why you're dangerous. You're a blueprint they never prepared for, a language they can't translate, a storm that doesn't come with thunder, just sudden impact. And chosen one, don't you dare doubt that precision. Don't let their noise make you question your silence. Your silence was strategy. Your patience was power. The fact that you didn't react emotionally is proof that you're not playing on their level. You're playing above it. They didn't lose because you cheated. They lost because they never evolved. They never adjusted. They never respected the quiet ones. The ones who keep showing up. The ones who don't need to be seen to be effective. The ones who don't brag about their plan. They become the plan. And now that moment is here. Your move, the one they can't stop because it's already been set in motion. All their confidence, it's crumbling. Their arrogance, it was the fuse. You were just the match. They should have known. They should have sensed something. But they didn't, because they were never trained to fear someone like you. And now, it's not just about winning. It's about making sure they never forget who really had the power all along. So go ahead, make the move. Not with noise, with precision, with impact, with the cold fire of someone who waited and now knows. They thought the game was over, but they never realized you were the one writing the rules. Number 3, they judged the cover. Now they're bleeding from the pages. They didn't take you seriously, and that's why they're losing to someone they never even saw as a contender. Their deadliest mistake wasn't what they did. It was what they thought. They looked at you and decided you were nothing, not a threat, not competition, not even worth a second glance. That assumption, quiet, smug, lazy, became their downfall. Because while they were watching the loud ones, the flashy ones, the ones desperate for attention, you were becoming the real problem in the shadows. They bet against you because they thought they had you figured out. You didn't talk like a threat. You didn't move like a threat. You didn't try to prove yourself. You didn't need to. That's what scared them most, even if they don't admit it yet. They assumed silence meant weakness. They assumed humility meant lack of power. And in doing so, they opened every door for you to walk right past them without resistance. While they chased clout, you chased clarity. While they put on performances, you built pressure. They didn't notice it growing. They didn't feel the shift in the air. But now, it's here. And it's too late. Let's make one thing clear. The world is built to spot the obvious, to reward the loudest, to fear what screams and shines. But that system is broken, because the true danger has always been subtle, steady, unseen. The real assassin doesn't wear the crown, they wear the cloak. The quiet kid in the back, the one nobody watches. That's the one who rewrites history when no one's paying attention. They made the fatal mistake of assuming you were just another one, just another dreamer, just another name, just another body in the crowd. But the universe doesn't pick just anyone. And if you've made it this far, if you're still standing, breathing, rising, then you weren't picked by accident. You were chosen. And chosen ones don't come wrapped in glitter. They come wrapped in storms. The more invisible they made you feel, the more unstoppable you became. They weren't watching, so they couldn't stop the growth. They didn't block the path because they didn't think you'd walk it. That's what makes you lethal. They gave you space thinking it was harmless, but space is all you needed. You used that silence. You used that rejection. You used the isolation. And while they laughed, you learned. While they posed, you planned. While they got drunk off their own noise, you built power in the quiet. You used everything they gave you, every blind spot, every assumption, every underestimation, and you turned it into ammunition. They never saw you as the threat. That's why you are the threat. You didn't fit the mold they created in their heads. You weren't loud enough, aggressive enough, ego-driven enough. You didn't make a show of your ambition. That's why they skipped you. That's why they turned their backs. But the universe doesn't elevate the obvious. It elevates the ready. and you were getting ready the whole time. And now, if you've ever caught yourself wondering, why didn't they see me? Why did they ignore me? Why was I always the one passed over? Here's your answer. Because they were never built to recognize quiet greatness. They only know how to chase noise. But your power didn't come from their applause. It came from what you endured without it. They weren't equipped to see someone like you coming. And that's why they're defenseless now that you've arrived. Chosen one, hear this loud. Stop apologizing for the fact that you were overlooked. Stop carrying guilt for growing in silence. That was your advantage. That was the whole point. If they had taken you seriously, they would have stood in your way, but they didn't. And now they can't. Let their assumptions rot. Let their ignorance cook. Because when you make your move, and you will, it won't just sting their pride. It will destroy their narrative. It will undo everything they thought they knew about power, about success, about who really wins in the end. They assumed you were average. But average doesn't survive what you've survived. Average doesn't carry what you carry. Average doesn't rise like this. You are the ghost they didn't believe in, the weapon they didn't see, the chapter they didn't read. And now, you're the ending they never expected. Let them feel that silence turning into thunder. They made a fatal assumption. And now, they're about to pay the price. Number 4, they were busy performing. You were quietly loading the weapon. You don't need to out-talk them. You just need to out-watch them. The loud ones reveal their playbook before the game even starts. While they were chasing claps, you were memorizing their rhythm. While they danced in the spotlight, you were studying their shadows. Every fake smile, every brag, every emotional outburst, they gave themselves away piece by piece. And you were there, quietly collecting the data. They didn't even realize the danger of being seen by someone who wasn't trying to be seen back. That's the power of observation. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't interrupt. It watches. It waits. It understands. They thought attention made them powerful. They mistook noise for strength. But the spotlight isn't a shield. It's a magnifying glass. And under that heat, everything gets exposed. Their pride, their insecurity, their fears, their blind spots. And you never had to lift a finger to find out how to beat them. They gave you the blueprint in real time because they thought no one was really watching. But you were. You didn't need to speak over them. You didn't need to challenge them head on. That's not how masterminds move. You just needed patience. You just needed time. Because the ones who need to be seen often forget who's standing quietly in the corner. And that's always where the real threat is. Let's be honest, people love putting on a show. It's not just ego, it's addiction, validation. They need to be respected. They need to be envied. They need to be feared. So they overplay their hand. They talk too much, reveal too much. They tell you exactly who they are, what matters to them, and how to break them without even realizing it. You didn't have to ask. They showed you. They made your job easy. And now, when the time comes to make your move, you don't need to guess. You already know where to apply pressure. You already know where they break. Because while they were focused on being watched, they forgot that someone like you was watching back. They never suspected you'd use silence as a weapon, that you'd let them believe you were nothing more than background noise. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence is data. It's clarity. It's the sharpest edge of a blade that's been waiting for the perfect angle. And here's what truly separates you from them. They were reactive. You were receptive. They were trying to prove something. You were trying to understand something. They were addicted to being seen. You were addicted to seeing through them. You learned their patterns, how they move when they're confident, how they unravel when they're afraid. You took note of every tell, every tick, every sign of weakness behind the mask, and they never even noticed, because they thought watching was passive. But for someone like you, observation is an act of war. You were building your arsenal while they thought they were putting on a show. And now, when you move, it won't be loud. It'll be surgical, exact, precise. Because this was never about brute force. It was about information. And you've got all of it. You know what they fear. You know what they expect. And more importantly, you know what they don't see coming. That's your edge. That's what makes you dangerous. They wanted to be impressive. You wanted to be prepared. They chose the stage. You chose the strategy. And the beautiful part? They still don't see you as a threat. Even now, even after all this time. That's how deep their delusion runs. And that's exactly why your rise will shake the ground they thought they stood on so firmly. So when you start to question your quiet nature, when that voice creeps in, asking if you should be louder, flashier, more like them, remember this. They needed to be seen to feel powerful. You became powerful because you didn't need to be seen. You are not behind. You are not too late. You've simply been watching from a seat they never noticed. And that seat? It came with a full view of the battlefield. They wrote you off while you were studying the script. And now? You're ready to flip the final page and rewrite the ending. Number 5. They took your silence for surrender. Now they're about to learn it was a sniper's aim. Silence is not a white flag. It's the stillness before a precision strike. They thought you had nothing. They thought your quiet meant defeat, that you were beneath them, broken, irrelevant. But silence is a language only the truly dangerous speak fluently. While they were loud, desperate to be heard and seen, you were still. Not because you were weak, but because you were focused. You weren't beneath them. You were beyond them. They assumed silence was a void. But silence is never empty. It's loaded. It's where the real preparation happens. They saw your lack of reaction and assumed you had no fire left in you. But fire doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smolders. Sometimes it gathers heat in silence, building to a burn so clean, so controlled, that by the time they feel it, it's too late to run. They were making noise, bragging, bluffing, flexing muscles that barely held weight. All the while, you were still, with eyes wide open, watching, absorbing, letting them spill their secrets in real time. They thought they were winning because you weren't clapping back, because you weren't performing too, but you weren't playing their game. You were setting the stage for a different one. See, people who need to be loud, who need attention just to breathe, are always in motion, always exposed, always leaking information they don't even know they're giving away. Every outburst, every reaction, every show of dominance is a crack in the armor. And you didn't need to break it. You just needed to learn where to aim. They don't realize that silence is a high-level tactic. That those who are truly dangerous don't need to defend themselves in real time. They're too busy building something stronger, something lasting, something calculated. The loud fight for the moment, the quiet build for the checkmate. And now, your silence has matured into something they can't comprehend. Leverage. You let them believe the lie that they were above you, that you had nothing to say because you had nothing to bring, that your silence was agreement, that you accepted your place. But every second of stillness was a second of strategy. Every moment you held your tongue, you sharpened your aim. You weren't lost. You were loading. You weren't invisible. You were just behind the curtain. You weren't late. You were patient. Now look at the irony. They thought they had the upper hand. They mistook restraint for weakness. They misread the silence of the hunter for the submission of the prey. And that's the last mistake they'll get to make. Because your silence wasn't just strategy, it was a trap. You gave them room to expose themselves, and oh, they did. They couldn't help it. They gave you everything you needed to dismantle their illusions. Every boast, a blueprint. Every insult, a data point. Every careless move made in confidence, a thread you now know how to pull. They have no idea how deeply you understand them now, and that's what sets you apart. Not just your strength, but your restraint. You didn't rush in. You didn't throw punches just to feel heard. You moved like a master, because that's what you are now, crafted by silence, sculpted in shadows, made sharp by stillness. You carry a kind of calm that makes people nervous because they can't predict what doesn't shout. So the next time someone questions your silence, remember this. Silence isn't weakness, it's alignment. It's focus. It's power restrained by wisdom. You didn't need to clap back. You didn't need to match their volume. You were never competing. You were constructing. And now, chosen one, that silence is over. Not because you're ready to talk, but because you're ready to move. The setup is complete. The trap has been sprung, and what they thought was your defeat was just your recalibration. Let them feel the weight of every word you didn't say. Let them regret every second they thought you were beneath them. Because now they'll hear your silence in everything that falls apart. Number 6, they were playing for points. You were rewriting the whole rule book. The ones obsessed with winning never stop to question the game. The ones who master it do. They were sprinting in circles, chasing trophies made of smoke, celebrating meaningless wins, posting every small victory like it meant they'd arrived. But you weren't in the race. You weren't trying to beat the next person in line. Because from the very start, you knew something they didn't. This whole thing, the system, the structure, the so-called game, was rigged, limited, and designed to keep the blind competing while the wise build something bigger. While they were fighting for status, validation, and short-term respect, you were sitting in the back, decoding the architecture of the entire system. You weren't trying to win within it. You were studying how to own it. They thought they were advancing, leveling up. But they were just climbing a ladder nailed to the same wall. You saw it for what it was, a closed loop, a rigged arena, designed to distract the ambitious with shallow prizes, while the truly strategic slip past the noise unnoticed. That's what you did. You slipped through the cracks they didn't even know existed. They laughed at you for not being competitive enough, for not playing louder, for not showing up to the same battlefield they were all dying on. But that wasn't weakness. That was intention. You were watching. You were mapping. You weren't distracted by titles, likes, praise, or rank. You wanted something far more powerful: position. Because real control never comes from winning the round. It comes from owning the rules, understanding the loopholes, finding the blind spots. While they were trying to win battles, you were learning how to make the battlefield irrelevant. And now you're in a position they never prepared for. A move they didn't anticipate. A threat they can't counter, because you're not just another player. You're the one who saw the hidden levers behind the board. They flexed every time they won something small. You stayed quiet every time you unlocked something big. They made announcements. You made shifts. They wanted applause. You wanted insight. That's why they're still chasing, and you're already moving differently. You don't just understand the game now. You've outgrown it. You've evolved into something they can't categorize. You don't need their wins. You don't even need their attention. That's why your presence hits harder than their noise ever could. Let's be clear. Being chosen doesn't mean winning by their standards. It means transcending the system. It means being so aligned, so aware, that you stop reacting and start shaping. They can't figure you out because you're not following the same script. You've gone off grid. That's what scares them. They don't fear another competitor. They fear someone who refuses to compete. Someone who isn't playing to win, but to change the game completely. And if you've ever felt out of place, disconnected, like you couldn't relate to the goals everyone else was chasing, that wasn't failure. That was clarity. You were never supposed to belong in that loop. You were made to break it. You were made to understand how it works, where it bends, where it breaks, where you can disappear and reappear with more power than before. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you dangerous. They never questioned the system. You did. They never saw the pattern. You tracked it. They never left the cycle. You escaped it. And now you see it all. Every move, every illusion, every trap dressed up as an opportunity. And while they're still scrambling for their next win, still trying to prove they're the best, you're no longer even on the same board. You're building your own. That's the mark of a true master. Not someone who wins by the rules, but someone who reshapes them, who shifts power without noise, who controls outcomes without being seen. You're not playing the game anymore. You are the game changer. So let them keep competing. Let them chase their points, their attention, their empty crowns. You'll keep moving in silence, with the whole board in your hands. Number 7. You grew in shadows. Now they can't track the storm you've become. The most dangerous force isn't the one you see rising. It's the one that evolved where no eyes could follow. They want to understand you now. They want to figure out how someone they ignored, dismissed, even mocked, suddenly became untouchable. But there's no map to follow, no trail to dissect, no blueprint to steal. Because your rise didn't happen in front of them, it happened far away from their reach. And now, you're an untraceable force, and it terrifies them. Most people grow under the spotlight. They want to be seen while they're improving. They need likes, shares, praise. They announce every small change. And in doing so, they give the world a front row seat to their progress and their vulnerabilities. But not you. You built in silence. You sharpened in solitude. No noise, no announcements, no validation. Just work. That's why you're a problem now. Because they don't know how you did it. They don't know when the shift happened. They just woke up one day and realized you weren't the same. And here's the part that really rattles them. They can't reverse engineer what they never witnessed. They can't copy what they never saw. Your evolution wasn't performative. It was surgical. You bled in the dark. You broke, rebuilt, recalibrated. And when the time came to emerge, you didn't just walk in. You shifted the atmosphere. Now they're scrambling to understand what you are, how you became this focused, this fearless. But there's nothing for them to trace, because your silence was your shield, your isolation was your armor. They'll say you came out of nowhere, but that's only because they weren't looking deep enough to see what was coming. That's only because they were too busy watching each other to notice the one who didn't need to be watched. You weren't trying to be seen. You were becoming something that couldn't be ignored. They tried to measure you by what they thought power looked like. Loud, flashy, constantly present. But your power didn't come from attention. It came from depth. You didn't just grow stronger. You became unfollowable. You became unreadable. You became unpredictable. And that's your true weapon now. Not just what you've become, but the mystery of how you got there. They can't trace your scars. They can't decode your discipline. They can't understand your peace, because it wasn't handed to you. You earned it in silence. You built it in moments they never saw. You're not just ahead of them. You're invisible to their calculations. And now they want to stop you. But how do you stop what you don't understand? How do you attack someone who never revealed the blueprint? You can't block a move if you don't know where it starts. You can't defend yourself from a threat that isn't loud, but lethal. You're not a storm on the radar. You're a pressure shift no one predicted until everything starts falling apart. And, chosen one, this is the part where you need to understand something too. Stop trying to explain yourself. Stop trying to justify how you got here. Stop trying to fit into their logic. They'll never get it. They weren't supposed to. Your path was encrypted on purpose, not for them, for you. So no one could interfere, so no one could manipulate it, so no one could taint it with their doubts, their opinions, their limits. You were hidden for a reason, not because you were weak, but because your growth needed protection. And now that you've arrived, the silence has done its job. You are no longer in hiding, you are simply unreachable. What they don't understand, they can't control. What they can't track, they can't contain. What they didn't see coming is now standing right in front of them. So let them guess. Let them talk. Let them fear what they don't understand, because you are not here to be understood. You are here to be felt. Number 8. They built their throne on ego, and you're the earthquake beneath it. The most predictable enemy is the one who thinks they've already won. That's not power, that's a countdown. They thought the game was over before it began. They thought you were beneath notice. They paraded around in their imagined dominance, so sure of themselves, so high on their own narrative, that they never even looked twice at you. That wasn't your weakness, it was your entry point. While they were feeding their ego, they were feeding your advantage. Every ounce of arrogance they pumped into the air became fuel for your strategy. Here's the irony that's about to crush them. They were never fighting you. They were fighting against their own inflated image. You were just smart enough to let them do it. And now, they're walking into their own trap, blindfolded by pride and led by delusion. Because here's the truth, the powerful never fall because of an outside force. They fall because they stop adapting. They grow lazy, predictable, addicted to being feared. They start to think their past victories guarantee future success. But power without awareness is a setup, and you've been watching it play out like clockwork. They convinced themselves they were untouchable, that they were above the rules, that they had already won, that you were just another harmless face in the crowd. And you never corrected them. That's what made it brilliant. You didn't argue. You didn't beg to be seen. You let them underestimate you again and again until their confidence became their cage and their pride their poison. While they were talking big, you were moving quiet. While they were showing off, you were showing up. They mistook your silence for surrender. And now they're mistaking your stillness for absence. But you've been here the whole time, 3 moves ahead. The moment they decided they'd already won, they stopped preparing for a threat. That was your window. They let their guard down while smiling at their own reflection. And they never noticed the storm building in the background. Now they'll feel it all at once, and they won't have time to respond. They were never as untouchable as they made themselves out to be. They were just loud. And loudness distracts. It blurs the line between real power and performance. But you never bought into the noise. You saw the cracks. You saw through the mask. You didn't chase what they had. You waited for them to self-destruct under the weight of it. And now, their fall isn't a surprise, it's a consequence. Because here's what happens to people who never questioned themselves. They lose to someone who did. They never evolved because they believed their own myth. They kept running the same play, using the same tricks, unaware that someone like you was studying them like a chessboard, piece by piece, step by step, until the checkmate became inevitable. They thought the game was theirs because they had the spotlight, but the spotlight blinds. It made them feel powerful while you became precise. They don't know how it happened. They won't understand why it's crumbling. But you do. You've known for a while now. Because this wasn't revenge, it was timing. And maybe part of you still asks, was I too passive? Should I have spoken up sooner? No, you did it right. You let them talk themselves into defeat. You let them dance on the stage they built for themselves. You didn't need to expose them. You let their ego do the job. That's what makes you lethal. Not just your strength, but your restraint. Your ability to wait until the perfect moment when everything they built starts working against them. Now they're falling, not because you pushed, but because they leaned too far forward. They created their own collapse. All you had to do was step back and let gravity finish the job. So let them play into your hands. Let them keep underestimating you. Let them keep believing they're in control. Because at this point, it's not even about you striking. It's about you watching them implode and knowing that everything they fed into the illusion of their own power was the very thing that made your rise unstoppable. Number 9, they finally noticed you, but you've already left them behind. By the time they aim at where you were, you're already ruling where they can't reach. They underestimated you for so long that they actually convinced themselves you didn't matter. They didn't just overlook you, they paused their entire awareness when it came to you, froze their perception, locked you into a version of yourself that hasn't existed in a long, long time. And now, as they scramble to respond, to deal with you, to stop your rise, they're swinging at shadows. Because you're not there anymore. You've already moved, elevated, advanced. You didn't just grow, you disappeared from their map entirely. They thought they had time. They thought they could come for you when they were ready, but time doesn't wait for the arrogant. You were never waiting for permission. You were already building, moving, planting flags on territory they didn't even know existed. And now, they're playing catch-up in a game you finished yesterday. This is the part they'll never admit. They weren't ready for you because they were too busy entertaining each other, showing off, competing with the loud ones, fighting over borrowed crowns. They thought you were stuck in place, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be taken seriously. But you weren't waiting. You were orchestrating. They still think you're where they left you. Still think you're the version they dismissed. But you've become something else entirely, something they don't have a manual for, something that doesn't follow the rules they're familiar with. That's why they're fumbling now. That's why they can't stop you. Because they're not just behind, they're in the wrong game. You already won. Not just by outworking them, not just by outthinking them, but by outgrowing the level they thought was the finish line. They're reacting to an opponent who no longer exists. The version of you they were ready to fight? That person died during the battles they didn't see, the silence they mocked, the storms you walked through alone. You became dangerous in moments no one clapped for. They missed the transformation because they weren't paying attention. And now, there's nothing they can do. Even if they tried to reverse the damage, rebuild their walls, strategize a defense, it wouldn't matter. They're late to a fight that already ended. You didn't beat them in public. You beat them in sequence. 10 moves ago, quietly, efficiently. The checkmate isn't happening now. It happened already. They're just slow to realize it. They thought you needed the spotlight to win. But the truth is, you needed the blind spot. Their ignorance was your greatest protection. Their ego was your camouflage. While they were watching the front, you slipped in through the back. While they were guarding their throne, you were building your own kingdom off-grid. Now, they can't trace your methods, can't block your moves, can't even name the game you're playing, because they don't recognize someone who's already done what they're still trying to understand. And let's be clear, this wasn't luck. This wasn't things just working out. This was calculated, earned, engineered in the dark. They didn't see you coming because they didn't want to. It was easier for them to pretend you weren't real than to confront the reality that someone they ignored could rise this far, this fast, this far out of reach. But now, reality doesn't care about their feelings. It's already been written. So when they finally try to deal with you, when they gather their strength, when they form their plans, when they sound their alarms, you'll already be gone. Too far, too big, too built. You don't even need to respond because you already made your move. And in case you forgot this truth, let me remind you, you already won. The moment they underestimated you, the moment they assumed you'd stay quiet, the moment they turned their backs, that was your beginning. And this is the moment they realize you were never trying to prove yourself. You were preparing to replace them, and now you see it clearly, the silence, the doubt, the setbacks. They weren't signs of weakness. They were part of the setup. You were never behind. You were simply becoming the storm they never saw coming. The game is already shifting in your favor. So stand tall, move smart, and never shrink again. If this message hit something deep in you, like and subscribe to keep this fire spreading. Drop the number 77 in the comments if you know you're one of the chosen, and share this with someone who's walking quietly, building loudly, so they remember who they are.